everyone, and hi, Aniela. I got goosebumps with your last sentence. um, but what I want to say that today, yeah, I agree with everything Aniela said, and our primarily goal of the conference is to focus the conversation about the future of design and development, the future of user experience and front-end development in this complex enterprise world. How this can be a mission successful and mission accomplished. I mean, it cannot be accomplished, but keep succeeding there. And we would like to invite you to be part of this conversation. It won't be a success if everybody is not involved in this conversation. But before opening up for all the topics, let me first share my screen. I hope you guys see the screen. So before, as I said, opening to the conversation in the front end and the design, let's focus just a little bit about fundamental library and what exactly the library is about. Some of you already most probably know, but for those who are joining us and listening for the first time, I want to say that it's an open source, truly project, and our primarily mission is to support teams building harmonized user experience, building this experience with their framework of choice. We believe that the technology decisions should be taken reflecting many factors. Obviously the design is one part, but not the only one. And of course, another quality is that we follow the SAP design system. So our main goals, the first is creating a harmonized experience. If you want to target users successfully and helping them achieve their goals, you have to offer an experience that is harmonized. It follows certain qualities. We started really small and we couldn't offer everything. So our model of working is federated. Means we are not offering everything as a whole. We started offering on layers, starting with the presentation layer, interaction layer, and more as well. Since it was small, we started with the most common components, layouts, and patterns. And as part of the SAP design, we also offering the theming capabilities. And we don't stop there. It continues also with the accessibility. In some cases, there is internationalization and globalization. But then the question that we've been asking ourselves: how do we measure success? There's not only one way of measuring success. There are different aspects: getting feedback from users, from customers, from stakeholders, discussing with them, improving. But there is one that it's always easy to be recognized is the usage. I'm kind of more than thrilled to say that since the beginning of the fundamental library, we surpassed 6 million downloads in NPM. That's quite some number, maybe not as much as like huge and successful libraries, but it's a good milestone to celebrate. And just for this year until yesterday, so almost 9 months, we passed 2 million downloads only for this year. And this is great. And the most important thing is I want to say thank you to the team working behind the fundamental library. Also, a big thanks to all the people contributing, being part of it, helping us, advising us, using us, complaining when there was really need to complain. Thanks to that, we are here. And I hope thanks to you guys, we'll be much more further ahead. And another thing, before looking in the future, let's take a minute and look how everything started, where it started, where are we now, and where we want to go. very quickly. So everything started, at least for fundamental library, in Hybris. There we created a small styling component library called Hybris Technique. The goal again was the same as I shared before. The difference was that it wasn't SAP design system, it was hybrid design system, right? Much smaller. And again, we try to be technology agnostic. Technology agnostic because even though the company was smaller, the teams were still already using different frameworks. And again, the objective was not to disrupt them, but just to help them. So that was the most important thing, not just to make a successful library, but to make something to help the developers, to help the users. Yes. Going forward, after creating this library, Hybris became part of the SAP's family, and our next milestone was, okay, we have the hybrid design system; it works for Hybris, but now we have access to users that are more than Hybris. How can we achieve that? And for that, our next big milestone, it was a big to change the design system from the Hybris one to SAP one. This is where we joined forces with other designers from across the company, with other acquisitions at the same time, and shaping the Fiori 3 version. It wasn't easy, but it turned out to be the right choice. Not to create a different version of design, but focusing on one, and then maybe enhancing it for the specific users. So a few years forward, now fundamental library is in one team with the folks behind SAP UI5. And we believe this is the right way to go. It's the right way to go because, if you want to offer technologies and libraries, we have to align together. We have to focus on what we can reuse so we can shift the gears for something additional on top of that. But before going also in the future, reflecting what are the values we've been sharing over the years. And this basically can help us and help you identify the future changes. So one thing that stayed always valid, it's helping the users, helping the stakeholders, but also helping the users, the end user, right? That's a very important part. So even more important, as I said, than the success of the library itself. So we have been doing sacrifices. I mean, not sacrifices, but some, let's say, not easy decisions, but the decisions were made because of our users. Another very important value is being a truly open source. This was a key success factor for us because thanks to that, we've been lucky to work with hundreds of front-end developers, designers, leaders, and other roles. Basically, we're not only consuming the library, but they've been helping, contributing. We were learning from them. And this wouldn't be a success if it wasn't an open source. Another thing that sometimes it's not easy to apply, but also was driving for us the reusability. Instead of implementing everything from scratch, we've been trying to see what we can reuse as a feature libraries, components. One of the first things that we started using was Popper.js. It was a killer library. It didn't have any dependency, and it was handling like when you have a popover on the edge cases. We tried to implement this in the past. It was so difficult, and we felt so relieved using this successful library there. And we didn't stop there. More about the reuse a little bit later. Another value was the technology agnostic solution, right? We want to help the teams, not to disrupt them. And another important part is one team. One team means all the folks working around the user experience, being in one team, making the decision together. This is including designers, the developers, the leaders, of course, stakeholders, right? Okay, so this is about fundamental. These are the values and what we've been doing in the last years. But what about the bigger picture? How is fundamental now fitting to the broader scope? And for that, I would like to invite one person that I've known for some years, maybe 8-9 years. He was my SAP UI5 trainer then. And now he's the SAP UI5 technology leader. This is Frederick. Frederick, do you want to join me?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Dino. Hi.
How are you?
Good. Yeah, it's great to be part of this conference for the first time for me. So thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me. And thanks for the good introduction.
Thank you for joining. And would you mind sharing what is like the bigger picture for us and where do we want to go?
Absolutely. Thanks very much for the introduction. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you asked me to talk a little bit about the bigger picture, I thought of one particular way of, let's say, describing how things fit together these days. And this is a slide we've been, sharing with a lot of folks inside the company already, just to explain how we believe the future of all of these different technology assets will be created and will be composed in the years going forward. And some of the things you already mentioned initially when you talk about the origins of fundamental is very important in this picture as well, because you talked about how in the time at Hybris when Techne was invented, there was already quite a vast different, let's say, amount of UI technologies and frameworks available. And one of the goals to achieve a great UX and design consistency across all of these products is something that's not easily done, obviously, because there is simply no one-size-fits-all, technology for all of these different situations. And that's maybe an entry point for this slide. So let me go ahead and run you through a few of the layers that we see when we talk about SAP UI technologies today. So at the sort of the bottom of this stack of assets, we see the design language. And the design language really is, the core things like colors, that are defined by a design system. It could also be things like icons and other small metrics and things like this. So really the basics, the DNA, if you want to, of the design system. And right on top of this, and quite logically connected to this, are visual design assets. Yeah? So for UI components, the visual design and how that is described sort of is based on the design language specification. Now, if you move further up this stack, there's something that carries a lot of weight when it comes to the implementation of a system. I hope that this slide advances. Yeah, the UI components behavior, right? The behavior really is when you start interacting with user experience elements on your page, right? A button is a very simple example. You only click on it, but you can think of much more complex controls like tables, for example, or more complex things like charts and so on, where there's a lot of interaction that needs to be implemented for the consistency of the entire experience, right, to be correct. And then moving further up the stack, this is really where you connect to the application developers out there, right? Because so far we're talking about UI assets, things that are of a reuse nature potentially, but at some point you have to create APIs and an environment where people can actually start building real applications on top of this. This is the programming model layer. And once you're on that level, the next levels above this are things that are more, that are simply bigger in nature and more complex. We call this patterns and blueprints. Think of these things or as a standard sort of page layout almost. Things like a search, a result list, or maybe a detailed object page where you can see a lot of details about something that you've pulled out of the system. These are patterns and blueprints, and you can obviously have a system that lets you code this manually. This is the pro code, let's say, version of this. But at SAP and also outside of this company, obviously, there are also variations where this is done in a sort of automatically generated way, usually based on some sort of metadata. And that's the low or no code version of it. So those are almost automatic full page experiences that come out of the box when a system has these capabilities, right? So this is kind of the layering that we envision. And so where does fundamental fit in, and what other components do we have available at SAP? Now, for the most common layer, the design language layer, we basically have on the very bottom, right, we have something that we call theming-based content. And this is really the thing that connects all of the different technologies on a very fundamental level. And this is the definition of the different colors and how they relate to each other in a theme, right? And so this is something that we've been sharing for a few years now already across different technologies, and obviously also connect this to fundamental styles and other implementations. On top of this, we are now working out something that we call common CSS. And I think, Dano, you will talk about this a bit later on, but common CSS basically is sort of that most common standard CSS that you can use across different products, across different technologies, where we basically believe that this is so fundamentally shareable that that should be its own layer, really. Now, and as you move up the stack into the visual design, this is where fundamental library styles is located. And the great value that fundamental library styles brought to the company was that because it is only targeting the visual design, so it's really targeting the styling on a CSS level, it was applicable basically to any system, right? So any system built in any kind of technology was easily changed by simply changing the markup so that that CSS could be applied on top of this. And that was, I think, one of the great reasons for the success within this company for sure, but also probably outside. And what we have talked about quite intensively inside of the company is what is sort of the next thing that comprises more functionality that still follows the same values as you described, Dano. So to be framework agnostic, right, to be open source and so on. And we think of a layer that we call a standard technology reuse layer. We call it SAP Web Components. And SAP Web Components basically is a collection of UI components that comprise both a visual design implementation as well as a behavior already. So these are standard web components from a technology point of view, right? So they're framework agnostic at this point and can be used in any other UI technology of choice. Now, what exactly does this mean, and how does it relate to other assets that come out of the fundamental universe? Well, first of all, if we move up the stack just a little bit more, we find an Angular implementation. And at SAP, usually this means the fundamental library NGX, right? And this Angular implementation currently uses fundamental library styles. But in the future, we envision this to also make use of the SAP Web Components, because there we see a lot of the reuse that you described as a value as well to actually happen inside of that implementation. So in the future, theoretically, an application can continue to make use of fundamental library NGX, but under the hood we will basically try to make as much reuse possible between the different layers as we can for cost-saving purposes, but also, if you look at the end user, for consistency reasons, because one single implementation will mean the best possible consistent behavior. Obviously, Angular is not the only thing. We also have applications using React. They can, do the same kind of thing. They can also build on top of web components, and so does SAP UI5 as well. And so this kind of creates, let's say, the overview of this sort of universe of technologies that we have at SAP available today. And maybe the most important things that I want you to take away from this is fundamental library styles, right, on the visual layer, as I mentioned, very important for existing systems to, be styled easily and to reach a certain level of design consistency. And for the fundamental library NGX, this has, probably a really good future ahead of it, because it is the known implementation of an Angular component set at SAP. And in the future, we'll hopefully benefit a lot from existing reuse that we create in this larger team, in this one team that Dano mentioned. So to hopefully, continuously put out world-class enterprise UI design and software. And with this, I'd like to hand it back to Dano. Thanks very much, and you can take control again of the screen.
Yes, thank you, Frederick. Looking forward to working with everybody in the same team that we are now. And very excited as well. Again, the decisions that we are making are consciously made decisions. It's not blindly going one or the other direction. The teams are heavily discussing. We had recently a successful workshop, and we're looking forward how to work together. But that I guess more to come, and stay tuned and follow us in the social media, in GitHub, and etc. A few achievements, a few noticeable achievements in this year. Obviously, the very first thing is the SAP Horizon team that we implemented and delivered. More about this. There is a session later on. I hope you can join, listen, ask questions. Another noticeable difference is also we worked on another track of creating a BTP design, and there is already some applications working and being live. This is again fundamental style layer that was used for the security applications, which really they want to focus on the performance. So thin layer of CSS only brings business design. A few more noticeable improvements or features is the internationalization. We did in Angular. Also, we've been focusing a lot offering development experience in fundamental NGX, right? Creating components like wizard generator, form generator, all features around this to help basically application developers to speed up their development, right? Okay, next steps very quickly. So over the next months and quarters, we will focus on enhancing the common CSS. Common CSS, basically, it's a package where we want to offer mixins. It is SAS functions, let's say, and CSS classes that can help you build your application, like from scratch, layouting, colors, spacing, fonts, and many more. Stay tuned for the documentation out there. We want, and we've been encouraged by our stakeholders to go to a final version. And now the team is working hard to focus on fundamental styles version 1 and NGX core. Again, continuation on the development and design experience. And yes, what we heard from Frederick, it's the see how the NGX platform will work with the SAP web component. Now, what to expect today? I mean, I'm sure you checked the agenda. If you haven't checked the agenda, please do so. But the few words from me, some of the questions that our speakers will be asking is how, for example, the corporate and creative world can work together. Another thing is how to engage with the community. What are the new challenges that we are facing there? Is there something new we can learn? What are the skills? Are there existing patterns out there in the same domain or in different domain that we can apply? How can we create on the technology agnostic? What is the challenge of innovating and being creative in the enterprise world, where you have to keep also your users having the stable software? That and many more things, I hope you can find in the presentations today. My wish for you is get inspired, try something new, and stay connected with us. Come with feedback. We are more than happy to have discussions, conversations, coffee corners with you, and maybe in the next years in person, not virtual. And with that, you can come visit us on the different channels and websites. And thank you, guys. I'm looking forward, working with you more.